757, I'd like to welcome to the microphone Neisha Himes, who is the founder of a nonprofit organization that is called the G.R.O.W Foundation, which stands for Girls Recognizing Our Worth, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Neisha, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing fine. And when I talk about this particular subject, I always get really choked up because it is something that when I want to talk about toxic relationships and abuse as a man, and I can't see other men really being abusive to their women if they love their women.
Right.
And vice versa, if their women really love their men, how could you be toxic to them?
Right.
You know. But let's talk about your story real quick.
Okay, sure. So I'm a survivor of domestic violence. I was in a very violent, toxic relationship for just about 5 years. And knowing what I know now and doing the work that I do, I know that in the first year, there was a lot of red flags and just things that I didn't either recognize as red flags or chose to ignore.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the second and third year was very verbally, emotionally, mentally abusive, including, control, isolation, manipulation. And then the last year and a half towards the fifth year included all of the above, but it had the physical abuse as well. So at that point, I was experiencing everything from being hit to being strangled. I've had broken bones. I got very good at doing makeup and going to work and pretending that everything was okay. So, that's it in a nutshell. I can go as deep as you want me to get, but, it was just a lot. And when you're in a situation like that, a lot of times you don't even recognize that you're in it until you've been in it.
Let's talk about emotional attachment.
Okay.
And what made you want to stay? Did you not recognize some of the signs early on?
So that's the thing about domestic violence. Like, people will always ask, why did you stay? And no one really asks, why is the abuser putting their hands on you, or why are they talking to you like that, or why are they making you feel less than nothing. So as far as how domestic violence starts, it's so gradual. You don't realize you're in it. It's not like you're on the first date, and then you get punched in the face and you're like, dang, this person's abusive. It often starts off with little things, especially as women, we get attached and we look at like, oh, this person is for me. They're giving me all those lovey-dovey vibes and they're making me feel special, not recognizing that some of those things that we're thinking is just affection and it's cute. Sometimes it's red flags and it's controlling. So, love bombing is a thing where if you're in the beginning of your relationship or you're not even in a relationship yet, you're kind of just talking and you find out this person is monopolizing your time. So it may start off like, why are you going out with your girls today? I really just wanted to spend time with you. Why are you, if you enjoy like hobbies like going to the movies or going to wineries or going to get massages or whatever, if you find that they want you to stop doing the things that you enjoyed doing separately, and now they're taking up all of your time, or maybe there's that insecurity, like, why are you hanging out with your girlfriends or your guy friends, or who is that on your social media? Is that just a friend, or is that somebody you're interested in? Have you dated that person before? So it really starts off so gradual, you don't even know it's happening. And it may be little insecurity things. Like my ex, he used to, if I didn't answer the phone in 2 rings instead of 4 rings, it was like, oh, were you busy? Was you on the other line with another guy? Like, who were you talking to? And you find yourself explaining yourself like, oh, no, I was cooking dinner for the kids, or I was doing my homework, or I just walked in the door from work. And when things start happening like that more and more, you have to pay attention to it. I do spoken word. So my ex, he had an issue with me going to open mics and wanted to know who my male poet friends are and who was that poem about. But again, it wasn't done in the beginning in like a malicious way. It was just like, I thought, oh, he really likes me, like, oh, he just wants to spend time with me, or oh, he's jealous. That's cute, but really, it's not. But in the beginning, you don't accept it as such. You think it's cool to feel wanted. You think it's cool that somebody gets a little like jealous about you or envious or whatever. But really, it's telltale signs of something greater potentially.
I have a couple of friends that over the years, when I look over their relationships, and they were in abusive relationships where either the boyfriend or the husband didn't appreciate them, belittled them, as well as wanted to control them and things that they can do by just keeping them shut off.
Right.
Right. And it's not good, because the simple reason, if you're a person already, you need to be increasing the person as to what they were doing, making sure they're standing as an individual. Because when I talk to them, they say, I lost myself.
Right.
Inside of it. And then the abuse came after they lost themselves.
Right. I became a totally different person. It got to a point where I stopped writing. I stopped performing spoken word because it got to the point where it was like, if I can avoid an argument, if I can avoid just dealing with what may come with if I go to that open mic or if I'm hanging out with my friends or whatever, I would rather just avoid that whole thing. So I just slowly stopped doing those things that I enjoyed doing. I'm very close with my family, but most of them are in Jersey, where I'm from, so it was easy to say I'm doing okay. It was easy to pretend that everything was fine. And even with social media, again, just doing what I do now and then looking back, it was just like, wow, this cycle is so real, because I was deleting my social media because it was hard to pretend that everything was okay when it wasn't. And, it just got to a point where I was looking in the mirror and didn't even recognize who I was. And then for me to stop writing, it was just because it was hard for me to put down on paper what was actually happening to me. So at this point, I'm being called out my name all the time, or being told that I'm worthless, or that nobody will want me because I had 2 kids and 2 different fathers, and just a bunch of different belittling things. And as I tell people, once they get you mentally, the rest is easy. And I was of the mindset, I had this whole misconception about domestic violence that victims are weak and they're cowering in the corner and somebody's putting their hands on you. And then I didn't realize that him calling me out my name and doing all these things, I thought he was a jerk. I thought he was rude. You know what I mean? I thought that he wasn't a good person at times, but then the good times would, in my mind, overshadow those things. Or I thought that if I could be more of this or less of that, or, I started shrinking myself to make this person feel whole, and I didn't associate it with abuse because he hadn't put his hands on me yet. And then when he started putting his hands on me, I didn't associate it with abuse because I fought back. So it wasn't like I was, cowering in a ball in a corner or hiding somewhere. I would fight back. And that's what I hear a lot of women say now, like, oh, well, everybody fights. Everybody fights in relationships. I fight back. I'm not a victim. I'm not weak. I'm not this. I'm not that. But that's not normal. That's not healthy. And if you have to learn to function in dysfunction, then that's an issue.
Wow. You're listening to Health Healing in Hampton Roads. Today we're talking about domestic violence with a domestic violence survivor, Neisha Himes, and she is the founder of G.R.O.W Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Now, Neisha,
Yeah.
when did you shift over to healing? Let's talk about that and pulling yourself together to know that this was not right in the right situation.
Right. That's a good question. So I was in that relationship, like I said, for about 5 years. And everybody, when you're being abused, you all have a breaking point, hopefully, because, what my breaking point was may be different for somebody else. I know women and men who it took one time for them to be hit and then they were out. And then I know people who dealt with it for 20, 30 years. So for me, I was in this relationship, and by this point, I was going through depression, uh, suicidal thoughts, just completely broken, just inside and out, being verbally, emotionally abused, physically, being strangled. That you don't realize how important air is until it's being taken from you. So it got to a point where it was either me or him. That's the way I saw it, and I was afraid of thinking like that. So at some point, he started going to counseling, and even though once he started going to counseling, the physical abuse stopped, the verbal and the emotional was still there. So when I tell people, like, yeah, the last time he put his hands on me was March of 2012, but that's not when the abuse stopped. So what made me finally leave was we got into an argument, and he was accusing me of sleeping around and calling me all types of names. And in the middle of that argument, he called my mother and my sisters, who I'm very close with, he called them the N-word. So this was an interracial relationship. It was my first and last interracial relationship. And when he called them that, that was the final straw for me, because it was one thing for me to not stand up for myself. It was one thing for me to just let somebody break me down, because that was my choice to do that. But it was another thing for me to allow somebody to do it to the women I love most, and they weren't there to defend themselves. So that was my final straw. And when I left, I still dealt with some things after leaving, as far as trying to leave for good and have him accept that. Because it takes a victim of domestic violence an average of 7 attempts to leave before they leave for good. And that's not to say they get assaulted 7 times. They may have been assaulted 5 times before the first attempt, 10 times before the second attempt, and so on and so forth. So when I left, I kind of disappeared into myself. And it was about a year and a half, 2 years after leaving that I decided to speak out. And the first time I did that was on a stage holding a microphone via spoken words. And that has been my source of healing. Healing is still an everyday journey. I mean, I don't know if you can tell, but my voice is like shaking right now, just because when you relive something like that, and then I see it every day in my line of work, in my 9-to-5 job, and in running my nonprofit organization. And there's so many people hurting and trying to break free from that. So healing is every day. I write, I do spoken word, I box, I hang with my family, my friends. I tell my story, and I try to turn pain into purpose, test into testimony. So that's what helps me heal.
Keep sharing that story, and healing will happen more and more and more as you start to share that story and that testimony along with it, because it's going to bring somebody else out to be able to stand up and have strength to do exactly what you did and be strong and come out of that situation. Now, let's talk about this. Let's talk about organizing a 501c3, because that process in itself is not an easy process to get through. But when you add to it the emotion that you have went through to form a 501c3 with the emotion along with the business aspect, tell us what that was like in that process.
Okay, sure. So G.R.O.W will be 5 years old this August, August 25th. I'm super excited for that. And it's an everyday learning process. When I started my organization, one of the reasons I started it is because once I started speaking out, I started getting asked for help. A lot of survivors were coming from everywhere: women, men, black, white, old, young, part of the LGBT community. It didn't matter. And I got to see how many people this epidemic affects. And it doesn't just affect those who are in the relationship, but the community as a whole. So I wanted to do more when I started speaking out, and I tried to get jobs in shelters or law firms that dealt with criminal justice and family law and things like that. And I found that I kept getting denied because I was being told that I didn't have enough experience because I didn't have a degree. And I'm all for higher education. I actually just signed up for school now, so I'm back in school as well. But there's no piece of paper on this earth that can tell you how to survive domestic violence if you haven't gone through it.
Come on.
Yeah, don't have me preaching in here. I will. But so I was working for a law firm at the time, a real estate law firm who also does like small business setup. And I went to my boss and I said, look, this is what I'm called to do. This is what I'm supposed to do. And I want to start a nonprofit organization. So I sat down with her. I did research and I began the process. So the first thing, I went to the State Corporation Commissioner's website, looked up how to reserve my organization's name. So I sent the paperwork in for that. I had to file my articles of incorporation. And then from there, fill out the 501c3 tax-exempt paperwork. So a lot of this stuff I did myself, like researched myself, and with the help of having an attorney who could go over everything, make sure my I's were dotted, T's were crossed. And I'm not knocking anybody who goes through the middleman and you pay somebody like the $1,500, $2,000 or whatever to do this paperwork for you. But really, I didn't pay anywhere near that to do it myself. And of course, like make sure you're going to have it looked into to make sure you're following everything correctly. But like the 501c3 paperwork itself is $275, like through the IRS. And nothing beats educating and researching and making yourself informed as well, because I know a lot of people who went through the middleman, which if that's what you choose to do, cool. But then they went through the middleman and didn't know anything about their business, didn't know anything about the paperwork. So again, it's an everyday journey with G.R.O.W. turning 5 and me getting to a point where I want to be able to do it full time one day.
Okay.
I just looked into, I hired a consultant at the end of 2020 and learned so much more about how to turn this small grassroots organization into putting it into fruition where I will have a building one day and I will be doing this full-time, running this organization. So it's a lot of work. G.R.O.W. is my baby, but and you have to have a strong team. I couldn't do what I do without my team because we all work full-time jobs. I'm at work right now in a conference room, having this conversation. So we all work full-time jobs, and then we get off work, and then, my day consists of talking to victims all day, then talking to G.R.O.W. victim survivors on my lunch break, leaving work, talking to survivors on the way home, going to the gym, then going home, talking to victim survivors again, so you have to be willing to put in that work and understand that if this is something you're passionate about, all the hard days, all the sweat, all the blood, all the tears, it will be worth it. It will be worth it because it's something you believe in. And I think that so many people believe in G.R.O.W. because they see how much I believe in G.R.O.W. and how much my team believes in
Come
G.R.O.W.
on.
Yeah.
There you go. Now we're starting to run out of time for Health Healing in Hampton Roads. One thing I do want to ask real quick before we do, close the door on this segment of Health Healing in Hampton Roads. Let's talk about pretty much helping.
Right.
And helping people come out of it, which the nonprofit organization does do. Let's talk about the support network that is there, that you provide.
Right. So I would like to say, if somebody comes to you and says that they are being abused or they think they're being abused, like the first thing you can do is just listen without being judgmental, because there's nothing worse than admitting that. Even admit that to yourself and then go to somebody else and say, listen, this is happening to me. It's very, very difficult. So if somebody comes to you, the first thing to do is to listen with non-judgment. You have to understand that the survivor is the expert in their situation. They are the ones having to navigate that life every single day. So what you can do to help is look up resources in your community. As far as Hampton Roads, there's a lot of great resources right here in this area. In almost every city in Hampton Roads, there is a domestic violence crisis agency, whether it's Virginia Beach and you contact Samaritan House, Norfolk, YWCA. Hampton, Newport News area is transitioned. Portsmouth, Chesapeake is her shelter. Suffolk is the Geneve shelter. I mean, it's so many different agencies here, along with small grassroots nonprofit organizations such as mine. So you can look up domestic violence crisis agencies in your area. You can help your friend's safety plan. Google how to safety plan. That could be anything from keeping an emergency bag in your trunk for your friend. If they send you pictures of bruises or like text messages or screenshots of verbally abusive incidents, keep that information. Email it to yourself so you have it for safekeeping in case that person needs it. Stash money to the side for them. I mean, it's so many different things that you can do. Have a safety word. If your friend texts you the word pizza, you know that that's your cue to send the police over to their house.
Unless they're really hungry.
Unless they're really hungry. Right. So, I mean, but if you have any further questions, just please feel free to reach out to me. I'm always available. G.R.O.W's website is www.growfoundationva.org. That has all of our contact information on there, all of our social media information on there, as well as information on red flags of abuse and what you can do to help somebody in need.
Neisha, thank you so much for your time. It's Health Healing and Hampton Roads. And if you are also, she was giving out a lot of those little areas. If you are a member of a relationship and you are having issues, there is a Virginia 24-hour family violence and sexual assault hotline. The number is 1-800-838-8238. That is 800-838-8238 INC. We got to do better.
Yeah, absolutely.
We got to definitely do better in order to, make things a lot better in relationships, in marriages, in everything. We need to have mental health, because that's what that is all about right there. Mental health, as well as being able to control yourself, for the whole mental, the physical, and don't let me wind in the spiritual, because it all plays straight in together. And we got to make sure we do better, Hampton Roads. There's Health Healing and Hampton Roads for this Wednesday.